The budget report lay open across the coffee table. Numbers, allocations, projected figures for the northern constituency that needed his signature and his mind, and his complete, undivided attention. Ariv looked at it. He knew something was off. The budget looked too clean. His jaw twitched. He hates cheaters. And those fuckers thought they can oversmart him. They have other thing coming. But then his eyes moved, without his intention, to the closed door across the room. His face was blank, but something dark crossed his eyes. He looked back at the report. A minute passed. Maybe 2. His eyes moved again. No, this is not him. He needs to focus. He set his pen down, sighing heavily. It was 4 in the morning, and Jaipur was doing what cities do before dawn, pretending to sleep while quietly holding everything together beneath the surface. A fine drizzle had begun outside, visible against the living room window as thin silver lines catching the distant light. The suite was hushed, the kind of hush that made a man aware of his own breathing. His mind, again without permission, went back to her dancing in a crowded place. Her curves, milky white waist, face so pure that a sinner like him should not touch her. Her eyes full of story, questions, and innocence, but fuck if he let anyone else touch her. Hell, what is he thinking? He needs to focus. He can't lose control because of a girl. A girl with blue eyes. He had observed keenly how her blue eyes crinkled with joy and lines creased her face when she let loose on her unrestrained dancing in the fort. She glowed with life, bright and vivid. In that precise moment, her beauty caught him off guard. He found her beautiful, beautiful and fascinating. Fuck, what is wrong with him? Focus, Agnivanch. Aaron had delivered the documents 2 hours ago, efficient and wordless as always. Ariv had instructed Aaron to root everything here, had sat down with the intention of working through the night the way he always did, the way that had always been enough. Work was his priority. Work had edges and outcomes, and a logic that followed rules he understood. He has a state to run, and some girl cannot come between him and his work. But she followed no rules he understood. He had sent Mira home with a promise. I will handle it, spoken in the quiet, certain tone that people in his life had learned not to question, not because he was cruel, but because Ariv Rajvanch had never once said something he did not mean. He would handle it. He always handled everything. His eyes moved to the door again. Fuck, what is wrong with you, Agnivanch? But she was sleeping behind it, or trying to. He didn't know which. He hadn't heard movement in over an hour, which meant either she had finally found sleep or she was lying in the dark being very, very still, the way people are when they don't want the world to know they're breaking. He recognized that stillness. He had perfected it himself. His jaw tightened slightly. He picked the pen back up, looked at the report. Northern constituency, budget allocation, infrastructure deficit. The drizzle thickened against the window. And without his permission, entirely without his permission, his mind went back. He closed his eyes to rid his mind of her thought. Much to his dismay, all he could see was her seductive moles, and here was her laughter. Both of those tempted him in more than one way. He leaned back in his chair in a resigned manner and closed his eyelids. Her innocent face flashed before his eyes. Ira. Little bird, he whispered. His thoughts drifted to the first time he saw the beauty of the desert. Back to a desert road in the thin gray hour before morning had fully decided to arrive. He hadn't been paying attention to the road. He never needed to. That was what drivers were for, what the entire infrastructure of his life was designed to provide. He had been looking at his phone, or at some document, or at nothing at all, the way powerful men look at nothing because they know the world will arrange itself around their inattention. And then, the screech of tires. The car stopped with a violence that was more controlled than it appeared. And through the windscreen, caught in the sudden stillness, Sir. She had frozen for just a moment. One single heartbeat of stillness, her dupatta clutched to her chest, her body caught between flight and shock. The desert morning moved around her, her scarf lifting in the dry wind, the end of it trailing behind her like something trying to follow her somewhere she hadn't decided to go yet. And her anklets. God, her anklets. The sound had reached him even through the glass. That soft, layered music of silver against skin. The kind of sound that belonged to old temples and older songs and places that had nothing to do with his world of budget reports and constituency maps and rooms where men decided the shape of other people's lives. The driver had stepped out. Said something. She had already moved. No backward glance. No acknowledgement of the near collision. No moment of drama. Just the decisive motion of someone who had somewhere to be and no interest in whatever had almost happened to her. But her face had turned, just slightly, just for the fraction of a second before she tucked herself back behind her dupatta, and he had seen it. Half hidden, the fabric caught the corner of one cheekbone, the line of a jaw that was both soft and decided, and above the cloth. Her eyes. Blue, unbothered, carrying the particular confidence of someone who has never needed anyone's permission to exist. She hadn't looked at him. The car had halted inches from her, and she hadn't even looked at him. He didn't know why that was the detail that stayed. Of all of it, the anklets, the flying scarf, the way the desert morning light touched her like it had been instructed to. It was the fact that she hadn't looked at him that settled somewhere beneath his ribs and refused to leave. Everyone looked at him. That was simply the reality of his life. Rooms changed when he entered them. Conversations rerouted themselves. Eyes followed. Always. It was not vanity. It was fact, the same way weather was fact, the same way power was fact. People looked at Arav Rajvansh because not looking required a deliberateness that most people didn't possess. She hadn't looked. Not out of deliberateness, not as a performance. She simply hadn't considered him worth the interruption. He had sat in the back of that car in the thin Jaisalmer morning, watching her move away down the road, anklets singing, scarf still flying, utterly unaware of the weight of his gaze on her back, and felt something shift inside him. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in the stories people tell. Just shift. The way a lock shifts when the right key is near it, not open yet. But aware, something inside the mechanism quietly, irreversibly rearranged. He hadn't called it anything then. He didn't call it anything now. Ira was never like any girl he had ever encountered, and that is why she is his. Arav blinked. The budget report was still open in front of him. The pen was in his hand. The drizzle continued against the window, indifferent and unhurried. He set the pen down again. Slowly, deliberately. His eyes moved to the closed door. Stayed there. She was behind it, in the same suite, or near enough, under the same roof he had chosen to occupy tonight, in the same building, breathing the same recirculated air. And she had no idea he was sitting out here in the dark, thinking about the first time she hadn't looked at him. Something moved through him that he didn't examine too closely. It wasn't concern, he told himself it wasn't concern. It was proprietary. That was the closest word. The feeling a man gets when something that belongs in his orbit is temporarily misaligned. When something that should be here has ended up there, and the wrongness of the geometry bothers him in a way he cannot entirely rationalize. She belonged here. Not because he had decided to be tender about it. Not because he knew what to do with her, or with the feeling of watching her sleep behind a closed door. But because Arav Rajvansh did not lose things, did not misplace them, did not allow the things in his orbit to drift to the edges and disappear. She was not going to drift. He wouldn't allow it. He picked the pen back up. Looked at the report. Northern constituency, budget allocation. His eyes moved to the door. He exhaled once, quiet, controlled. And then he heard it. The faint, unmistakable sound of movement behind the closed door. The soft shuffle of feet finding the floor. Someone awake in the dark, carrying something too heavy to sleep through. His pen stilled. Every nerve in him, the ones he kept perfectly, ruthlessly managed at all times, went completely, absolutely quiet. She was awake. He didn't move. He simply waited. The way he always waited, not with patience exactly, but with the particular stillness of someone who has never once doubted that what they are waiting for will eventually come to them. It always did. She would too. He didn't know what love was. He had never needed to. But he knew, with the same cold certainty with which he knew everything, that the girl behind that door, the one with the flying scarf and the silver anklets and the eyes that had looked straight past him on a Jaysalmer road that day, was already his. She just didn't know it yet. And neither, entirely, did he. But the lock had shifted, and some mechanisms, once moved, cannot be returned to what they were.